Hello students, welcome to this video on measurement of inflation. So before starting with the measurement of inflation, let us consider the definition of inflation itself. Inflation is a continuous and sustained rise in the general price level over a period of time with a corresponding fall in the value of money, which means that inflation occurs when prices in general in the economy are rising. If the price of one or two commodities are rising, then we are not talking about inflation. Inflation is when prices of most of the goods and services we consume on a daily or monthly basis are rising, then it is inflation. Now, how is inflation measured? To calculate inflation, we use price indices. We have the consumer price index or the retail price index. Both are calculated in the same way. So to calculate the consumer price index, first of all, we have to select a base year. The base year should be a year in which there are no major changes. For example, we are not going to choose 2020 as our base year, because in 2020 we have got the COVID and there has been major changes in the economy. People have lost their job. There has been major changes in the economy. So 2020 will not be a good year at all. So we can take, for example, 2018 as our base year. This is possible because in 2018 we did not have any major changes. Now, once we have selected our base year, we are going to give our base year price index a value of 100. This is always the case. Our base year price index will be 100. So in our base year, all prices will have an index of 100. Then we select a basket of goods. Our basket of goods will consist of all those goods and services which are consumed by the average household. We are going to include goods such as milk, rice, salt, flour, but we are not going to include liquors, cigarettes, or luxury items like expensive jewelries. These are not going to be included in our basket of goods. Once we have selected our base year and our basket of goods, we are going to assign weights to the different items in the basket. Weights will reflect the importance that we attach to the different items in our basket. Why we have to assign weights? It is because all goods are not going to have the same importance in terms of how much we spend on the good. For example, we are going to spend much more on rice than on salt. Our expenditure on rice will be much more than our expenditure on salt. So these different goods will have different weightage depending on the percentage of income we spent on the good. Then we can calculate once we have assigned the weights, we can calculate our CPI. An example has been done for you. So if we have flour, rice, and salt in our basket of goods, we are going to calculate the current price index. The current price index will be the price index in our base year plus the change in price in the current year. For example, if the price of flour has increased by 2%, our current price index for flour will be 100 plus 2% will give us a price index of 102. Similarly, for rice, if it is 110, it means that the price change for rice is an increase of 10%. For salt, it is 90, which means that the price of salt has decreased by 10%. So decreased by 10%, we will have a negative value of 10. So when we have 100 minus 10 will give us 90%. Then we are going to calculate the weighted price index. Weighted price index will be the price index multiplied by weights. 102 multiplied by 40 gives us 4,080. For rice, similarly, 110 multiplied by 50 gives us 5,500. And for salt, it will be 990 multiplied by 10. Then we are going to add up all the weighted price index and divide by the total weights. Adding up the weighted price index gives us a value of 10,480. Divide by total weights 100. Our CPI will be 104. Now, what is inflation? To calculate inflation, we are going to take the value of our CPI. Okay, the value of our CPI is 104.8. Now, 104.8 minus 100, which is our price index in the beginning, we minus 100. We divide by the base year 100, multiply by 100, give us 4.8%. Or simply we can do 104.8 minus 100, give us 4.8%. This will be the rate of inflation from with respect to the base year. So inflation, the change in price during the period will be 4.8%. Okay, so if our base year is 216 and our current year is 218, so the rate of inflation between this period will be 4.8%. Now, let us consider different values for CPI. If we have the CPI for different period of time, how are we going to calculate the rate of inflation? So, CPI in our first period is 100. So it means that this first period is our base year. In the second period, CPI is 105. This means that our rate of inflation for the second period compared to our base year period is 5%. If we calculate inflation from period 2 and period 3, we are going to have an inflation rate of 14.3%. How we calculate this? We take 120 minus 105, divide by 105, multiply by 100, and this gives us 14.3%. So this means that inflation during period 2 and 3 is 14.3%. In the same way, we calculate inflation from period 3 and 4. From period 3 and 4, inflation is 4.2%, and from period 4 and 5, inflation is negative 2.4%. Let us now analyze the different values of inflation, which we have here. So inflation from period 2 has increased to 14.3 in period 3, which means that prices from period 2 to 3 has increased. But what has happened from period 3 to period 4? The rate of inflation has fallen from 14.3% to 4.2%. This means that there has been disinflation. When inflation falls, it means that there is disinflation in the economy. When there is disinflation, it means that the rate of inflation is falling, but prices are rising. Okay? Important to note here that in a period of disinflation, when inflation rate is falling, prices will be rising. Okay? Which means that in the period we have considered here, in period 3, prices has increased by 14.3%. In period 4, prices has increased by 4.2%. The rate of increase is lower, but prices in terms of values, prices are rising. Now, what happened during period 5? During period 5, the rate of inflation is negative. When we have a negative inflation, it means that there is deflation. Deflation is a period when prices are falling, when prices in general are falling. So in period 5, we have deflation, which means that prices are falling. Now, we can also analyze from the figure here, from the table here, we can also analyze that when prices are rising, our CPI will be increasing. The value of our CPI will be increasing. When there is deflation, the value of CPI will fall. Now, as long as inflation is positive, as long as the figure of inflation is positive, we are going to have increase in our prices. Our prices will be rising. So, if we compare period 1 and period 4, we can conclude that during period 4, prices were at its highest level. Prices were rising, so it was at its highest level in period 4. Now, in period 5, prices are falling, but when prices was lowest, this will be in period 1, because from period 1 to period 5, we have an increase in prices. We have an increase in prices of 22.6%. How we calculate this? From period 1 to period 5, inflation will be from period 1 to period 4, inflation will be 25%, and from period 1 to period 5, inflation will be 22%, which means that from period 1 to period 5, prices has increased by 22%. So in period 1, prices was at its lowest level, and in period 5, it increased by 22%, but in period 4, it increased by 25%. This is why inflation is highest in period 4 and lowest in period 1. I think how we calculate inflation is clear to all of you. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.